Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the JT Jorphy podcast. This week, I have with me an old friend of mine, and now he is a winemaker, Eric Bihl. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. This is
Yeah, so
actually my
maybe,
second podcast that we've done together.
yes,
You'll
yeah, one of
remember.
them was
And
not published.
yeah, and hopefully never will be. I hope that we get to go back and listen to that at one point with you, Willie, but this seems a lot more professional already.
Yeah, yeah, the first one was on a road trip when we were basically bored, trying to kill some time driving up to Vermont. We
Uh,
decided to, on the fly, record a podcast with the crew. So, welcome back to
Thank
the
you.
format. So, maybe you could start off, tell us how you got into making wine.
Yeah, so I actually started in sales. A mutual friend of ours, well, friends really, Peter and Elliot were working on the sales and distribution side for a domestic producer called Gallo. And so I kind of started there. I wanted a job in sales, and those guys were in it. They seemed to be enjoying themselves, and I said, "Hey, it's a good company. We're hiring." So yeah, I started in sales, and then you kind of always had this on the back burner, this project with Kenan to sail across emotions. And so I knew that I was gonna be taking possibly like a break from my career, but I really liked the wine industry and really wanted to learn kind of more about the physical production of it. I was spending a lot of my time in sales meetings and going over numbers, and you get a little bit disconnected from the physical product that you sell. And so, I thought to myself, I knew that Ken and I were kind of planning on stopping in either Australia or New Zealand. And I'm like, oh, well, this would be a good opportunity. They always need help during harvest time, either in the vineyard or in the winery. This would be a really good idea, or a really good opportunity to kind of really figure out and get a closer look at the production side of things. And I ended up absolutely loving it. So worked on a vineyard in New Zealand for a growing season, and then harvest I did in the winery there. Um, the winemaker there was amazing, taught me an enormous amount, enough to the point where I could then take my resume and go to another winery and say, hey, like, these are all the things that I know how to do. And so I got another job at a winery in South Africa, and then another job at a winery in New Mexico. So yeah, it's kind of all started there, and did go back and do kind of sales for an importer briefly when we were in DC. But if I had my druthers, I would just stay in the winery all the time and just wear rubber boots to work. That's what I enjoy.
Yeah, is there much time, I guess, spent outside, inside? Like, how much kind of manual labor is involved in that in the production?
It's a lot of it. It's a lot of manual labor. It's you kind of have this like sexy idea of the wine industry of like sniffing wine and sitting around amongst the barrels, but that is highly glamorized. Most of the time you're like a quarter janitor. I mean, it's an enormous amount of cleaning. It's a more enormous amount of moving stuff around with a forklift. Probably 15% of what I do is actual chemistry,
Okay.
and the rest is mostly like labor. So yeah, it's a pretty it's a pretty physical job, especially in smaller wineries. Ironically, the bigger maybe not ironically, but generally the bigger a winery gets, the more things get automated, and so there is less there's less humping equipment and stuff around. It gets a little bit easier the bigger things get.
Right. And maybe just to rewind back, we obviously went to school together, and kind of wondering if during that time in your studies and you're kind of planning toward the future, if you thought that you might go in a kind of direction like this, or if you anticipated maybe going into more kind of knowledge work or a more academic type of studies rather than more kind of hands-on production of a product, if that was something that had crossed your mind while you were in school.
Not really. I didn't take I took a lot of French classes, a lot of econ, and a lot of English classes. A double English French major, and then minor in econ. I know a lot of our friends and but just a lot of people from Wake in general do like an entrepreneurship track. I did not do that. I did take a French business class where the professor was shout out Byron Wells. He was very kind of entrepreneurially minded. And he essentially, this class was, we took case studies of small businesses and looked at how they worked, and but everything was in French, so you kind of got all you get, it's a way to get all the odd specific business jargon and vocabulary. But it did have me think, it did kind of have me thinking, yeah, like a bit about, would I, like, do I have the constitution to be my own boss, to create something and then sell it. But it wasn't something that, I didn't have like a whole lot of plans. I knew that I am a more outgoing person, and so I knew that sales was probably going to be, if I was going to make any money in this world, that was probably going to be my avenue for it. But yeah, it wasn't necessarily anything that I had like planned kind of getting here. It was all just, kind of one thing leads to another. And sometimes it's easy to like maybe think you need to pivot, or but for me, it was like, once I kind of got into the wine industry, I was like, I kind of like it here. I will continue, at least, like, within this vertical. And for me personally, I think that gave a pretty, like, nice amount of closure is the right word, but it just kind of like once I just kind of told myself, like, I'm just gonna stay in this, like, this is gonna be my industry, like, this is what I'm gonna stay in, then it has you looking in a more focused way at specific opportunities within a given industry. And for me, I think it just kind of like helped me focus in life, and kind of block out some of the distraction of like, oh, well, this is similar to this, and I could go do that. And, it's kind of easy to get wrapped up in the millions of things that you could do.
Right.
So like at a certain point, like, you gotta make some choices. And yeah, sometimes that can just, really help you focus.
Yeah. Speaking of making some choices, as a novice myself on the wine game, and going into a store, into a wine shop, and trying to determine what to get, could you run through some of the basics as to what types of things to look for? Maybe you, as someone very close to the product, could give some tips and tricks to those looking to get a nice bottle for a dinner or something like that.
Yeah, I would say best tip I can give is find an independent wine shop and tell them, go in there, talk to the guy. I mean, those guys, they have tasted everything that they've put on their shelves, and for everything that is on their shelf, they've probably tasted 4 or 5 other wines for like a given category that they wanted. So I would say find a good indie shop, talk to the guys, tell them what you're having for dinner or what you want to spend. It's like, hey, I'm going over to a friend's house. I think they're having lamb, and I want to spend like $30. And they usually, more often than not, they will find you something excellent at, kind of any given price range. Grocery store's a little tough. It's overwhelming. It's also overwhelmingly produced, generally domestic, and usually those, like, there will be, however many 400 SKUs on the wall, but there's really only like 30 producers kind of shown. That's like what you don't see is like a lot of these bigger places that sell in grocery stores and stuff have multiple labels. And so it's it can be harder to kind of, figure out the provenance of something or the quality of something. A lot of smoke and mirrors in that world. But yeah, I would say go find an indie wine shop and just tell them what you're looking for, and they'll point you in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the meal and the pairing seems pretty crucial as far as what type of wine to get, because you have such a wide range of different, I guess, flavors and notes and things like that to complement. Is that, I guess, something that you view as important as well in your own practice, just making sure that the food and the wine line up, and being very intentional about that?
Yeah, it can be important. It can not matter that much. Another fun thing too is if you're looking for something specific, you ask them, this is like specifically what I'm looking for, but what else you got? Like, what came through your door recently that you're excited about, that there's usually something new, something that, maybe they're really into biodynamic wines or natural wines. Or Lauren and I used to live next to a great little indie wine shop where the 2 owners were from Georgia. not like peach growing Georgia, like ex-Soviet bloc Georgia. So
Okay.
they had a ton of Georgian wines there. They have a bunch of varietals that are specific to Georgia. Saperavi is a really good like kind of deeper red. But so I would always kind of go in there and pick their brain about Georgian wines because it was some fun that you didn't see everywhere else.
Very cool. Yeah, and you mentioned New Zealand, South Africa, New Mexico. These are places that I guess I think of California as the biggest producer, and the climate there being pretty sunny year round. Is that something that kind of all of these different regions have in common? Is sunshine particular climate, or is it kind of you can grow wine in a variety of different zones?
Yeah, you can grow wine in a variety of different places. More often than not, you need a certain amount of sunshine. It can't be too cold because the vines can freeze in the winter. So it has to be like, so you don't see a lot of wine growing in like northern Canada, for example. They do grow wine grapes in Canada, but it's difficult. It's a Sisyphean undertaking. I mean, you're like constantly worried about early frosts and stuff. I would say the biggest, essentially, like wine, like grapes for wine are the best when they're stressed out. So you want a place that has enough nutrients, enough sunlight, enough water that they can produce, but you want to stress them to the point where the vine actually kind of thinks it's dying. And so it wants to propagate because that's ultimately the grape is like an offspring, right? So if you
Uh,
think it almost seems a little cruel if you kind of put it in like anthropomorphic terms, you like humanize the vine, like you are making it think it is constantly dying, so it's
mm,
trying to propagate to continue its line. So you want kind of just enough nutrients, but not too many, just enough water, but not too much, and then sunshine. You need a certain amount, and then there's no real top end. New Mexico has like 310 days of sunshine a year, so it's easy to make stuff grow if you have enough water. But yeah, there's not really a top end. There's probably a bottom end of about 110, 120 days a year that you absolutely like that you would need sunshine in order for stuff to grow. So anywhere between 110, 120, and then 320.
yeah, interesting. I didn't realize that the stressors and I guess the yield has to do with their survival mechanism and like just creating more grapes to make more seeds to increase their chances of having more of them grow into vines themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is kind of a little bit sad. Sorry, wine.
Well,
You mentioned biodynamic and natural wine. I know when we were talking a couple weeks back, had some funny descriptors on a natural wine that you and your wife were tasting at a dinner.
yeah.
Maybe you can walk through the audience on just what those terms mean, and then maybe what they could look out for as far as how that might taste different than a typical wine they may get.
Yeah. So natural wine, there's not really a consensus around what that means, but I would say kind of the more dogmatic natural wine producers, an easy way to like look at it would be nothing added, nothing taken away. So they generally like I make a more traditional style of wine out here in New Mexico, use yeasts that we buy from companies that they synthesize it generally from like grape skins, but they've been doing this, most of them are French companies, they've been doing this for 250 years, just getting the perfect strains that'll give you nice flavors for the varietal given. You don't necessarily have to add yeast. It exists in the grape skin, and if you just wait, it will start fermenting by itself. But it doesn't always give you the flavors necessarily that you're looking for, the style that you're looking for. So that would be like where I would add something, that person would just be like, no, we wait.
Mm-hmm.
That also, if you're buying grapes like we do, or even if you have vineyards yourself, you need to produce, you only have so many tanks. You need to produce, usually the whites come before the reds in the harvest. But you got to say like, these got to be out of this tank in 14 days and like either in barrel or in some other storage container because like I need this fermenter for the next round of grapes that's coming. So like it is a luxury to just use indigenous yeasts. But
Mm-hmm.
so that would be like an addition that I do that a natural winemaker wouldn't do. Another addition is we generally add about 40 parts per million of sulfur before bottling. It gets everything, nice and stable. So, your wine doesn't re-ferment or have off flavors. A natural winemaker will not add that. And then another thing that we do that a natural winemaker probably wouldn't do is we filter our wine. So essentially we use plate and frame. There's a lot of different filters out there, but there's kind of take out any possible, leads to their microbial stability, take out some bitterness, generally clean the wine up, make it people generally, they're getting more, I would say, accepting of turbidity in wine, but most people want, when they look in their wine glass, they want it to be clear.
When you say turbidity, is that like
Yeah,
particles
like
or?
haziness. So like any kind of like, protein particulates, which generally don't affect the flavor of the wine, like, or the quality. Like you don't have to filter, but people like the consumer generally wants like, a nice, clean, clear wine. So that would be an example of taking something away. So yeah, I guess like natural winemaking is you just let it sit in the tank until it ferments to dry, and then you bottle it. Maybe
Interesting.
you move it off the lees, which are essentially the dead yeast cells that fall out of solution and collect in the bottom of the tank. Maybe you don't. Maybe you just bottle it with a bunch of gunk in the bottom, and you say, "This is how I do it."
Yeah.
And I've had excellent natural wines that are made that way.
Yeah.
I think that most natural wines I've had, if I had made that wine myself, I would consider it faulty. They tend to have volatile acidity issues, which can make it smell a little like vinegar. They can have aldehyde issues, which is like that kind of like Band-Aid, like smell a Band-Aid. It has that very kind of like specific, like tangy smell. And then kind of like real like farmyard or mousy is a flavor that, if you ever smelled like a mouse, like put your head in a hamster cage, like that smell and taste, is kind of a hallmark of, I don't want to say poorly made, but a lot of natural wines, people will, and some people like that. Lauren has a much higher tolerance for that, like kind of like funky barnyard stuff than I do. But it's like to each their own. So that would be natural wine, and then biodynamic generally is a lot of those producers are natural wine producers as well. But biodynamic does have a kind of specific set of parameters around it. You plant and prune through the lunar cycles, so it's kind of based on astrological movements.
Yeah.
Or astronomical, yeah. I think astrological. Anyway,
It's
and
like
then
full
there
moons and
are
new moons. Those are like the
yeah,
cues to do things.
exactly. Yeah. And then they also will, depending on where on the biodynamic spectrum you fall, they'll make kind of preparations in the soil. Some of them involve animal blood that they put in horns and bury. It gets a little woo-woo
Yeah. Sounds like it.
for me anyway.
Yeah.
But I will say this about biodynamic farming, and wine production. Whereas natural wines, I would say more than 50% I would consider faulty. Biodynamic wines tend to be excellent, and I don't necessarily think it's because Mercury is in retrograde. I think it's because if you are that dogmatic and you are paying attention to the cycles and you're paying attention to these preparations, you're just paying attention in your vineyard and your winery, and things are going to be there's more attention to detail. Things are going to be cleaner. You're going to spot if you have any kind of like microbial or insect infection in the vines, like because you're doing all these other steps, you're noticing that. You see that in the health industry too, like with nurses that spend more time, like the more time they are able to spend with a patient, and talk to them, they notice more things, and ultimately can identify problems faster or solutions faster. And so the amount of time spent with a patient really helps health outcomes. And I think it's kind of the same thing with biodynamic. It's just being there, putting in the time, your product is going to be better.
Yeah, yeah, like where attention goes, energy flows, as they like to say. So it makes sense that if you're paying a lot of attention and putting a lot of energy into the process, into the plants, into the end result, it's probably going to be of higher quality just because you've paid attention to it and made sure that it's as good as it can be. So
Exactly.
makes sense. Is there anything, I know I've heard the term regenerative farming for agriculture. Is that like a kind of similar, is Is that in wine circles as well, like where you're trying to pay attention to the soil and have it be like more of a closed loop where you're not necessarily needing to use fertilizers and pesticides, but you're kind of like regenerating as you go? Or is that kind of more on the agriculture side? Have you seen that?
Yeah, we see that. I don't think people use the word regenerative quite as much. So wine on the agricultural spectrum is a pretty like low impact crop. It doesn't take a lot of water. Again, it doesn't need or want a whole lot of nutrients. And so if you're growing alfalfa, for example, you're leaching a huge amount. That's why monocultural farming, they leach a huge amount of nitrogen and nutrients out of the soil, essentially making it far less fertile. And then they have to either plant another crop or let it be like fallow for there's like a 3-tier system from medieval times, have grazing on it. Because wine's a lot lighter touch, you don't necessarily see that. They produce less, but 100-year-old vines make excellent wine. You pay
The
for
plant
it.
itself is 100 years old.
Yeah. The vines themselves are, you can go out to Lodi. There are old gnarly Zinfandel plants that are 80, 90, 100 years old. You'll never find a field in Kansas that they've been growing the same crop on for 100 years, because it's going to decimate. It's going to make it infertile within however many years. I don't know. I'm not a farmer, but we try to fertilize generally with the skins and the stems and the skeet, like all the kind of ag waste that we produce in the winemaking process. We put back in our vineyards. That's really all we need, is like 15% of what we produce. So we send the rest of it to a place called Soilutions that composts it and sells it as compost. What I would love to see, but would require a very large capital investment, and no doubt like a loan or bond from the state of New Mexico. But if they did methane capture or carbon capture at Soilutions, and I could buy the natural gas for our forklift using the grape skins that we bring to them, that kind of closed loop, I would love to see that. I
That'd be
don't
cool.
know. I don't know what one of those machines costs. No doubt millions and millions of dollars. I'm like a massive biodigester, but it'd be cool.
Yeah, yeah. The closed loop. This forklift runs on wine waste.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
That'd be awesome. Very meta. Cool. Yeah. Anything else about the wine industry? I know I want to pivot a little bit more to lifestyle and family and things like that. But anything else we should keep an eye out for when considering our next bottle of wine?
I don't think so. Keep drinking wine. Everyone's ringing the death knell of the wine industry currently. Just, I guess apparently Gen
Gen Z.
X, or no, yeah, Gen Z aren't drinking as much, and people aren't drinking wine as much. But I don't know. I think these things are cyclical, and I also, New Mexico is, we tend to consume locally made products, so we're a little bit insulated from the peaks and valleys of the larger industry. But yeah, keep drinking wine.
Cool. Nice. Yeah, so I definitely wanted to bring up kind of new family life. You got a new member of your family over there. I was an honored guest to stay at your place and got to meet Theo, and super cute kid. And yeah, I was inspired by your kind of approach. I know the thing that jumped out to me, which my wife is pregnant now, and we're kind of planning toward how we want our home setup to look like. And you and Lauren, your wife, are big proponents of minimizing or reducing to zero the amount of screen time. I'm kind of curious maybe what your motivations were there and how you go about implementing that when there's so many opportunities for distraction with screens and kind of that easy way out of like a babysitting with an iPad.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we decided on that just because I think we felt one of the better things that Apple ever did was put that timer on your on your phone and your computer, and you can actually see how long you spend per day looking at either or both of those things. And it can be pretty alarming. So we both just decided that it's probably we had a problem personally, and so like a little, malleable, mushy 1-year-old brain, like what is this going to be doing to them? Probably nothing good.
Right.
So we just kind of just decided from the jump that we were going to be, yeah, as close to, as close to zero as possible. Every now and again, like we'll go over to a friend's house and they're, watching the game, or, we bike to a brewery and, something's on. I think they had wrestling on the last time that we biked to the brewery, and he was watching that. He was like,
It's hard to ignore.
yeah, 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 yeah. He's like, he was very confused, and I was like, I'll I'll explain this later.
Is this a
But
potential career, Dad? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, he could have joined with Doink and Dink, the little people that were like WWE in the late '90s, I guess. He could be Doink Dink and he Dank or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just essentially, we only have one TV in the house, and like, we'll watch movies every now and again, but we try to just limit it as much as possible for ourselves, and then for him, we just, I don't know, he doesn't have an iPad. We have the TVs in the office, which isn't really like a play friendly area. So like he's just got his like little playroom, and we just try to go outside. I mean, yeah, again, the weather here doesn't suck, so it's
Yeah.
300 days. It's nice, so you can go outside.
Mm,
Not
that's
everybody
that
benefits
option.
from that.
Yeah.
But even then, it's like, play trucks in the house, or we got him a little like push bike, and build a fort out of whatever Amazon box mom brought to her house.
Yeah.
um, yeah, and just it hasn't been. I don't know. I've never felt like I needed that as a distraction or as a whatever.
Yeah.
Once you've decided that you're not going to do that, you just don't,
Find
I
other things.
guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not like, I don't know, like, I don't want to say like that's the absolute right thing, or that he will grow up like not knowing what a television is until he's 12. I don't think either of those are realistic, or probably good either. But yeah, for us, it was just, limit as much as possible. I do think that as he gets a little older, I would like to try to teach him French, which is like just as much on like, Godspeed all the parents who are like trying to do the like two languages at home, because the amount of discipline it takes to like remember and like, speak only in X language to them it takes an enormous amount of discipline, and possibly as a way to make up for my lack of discipline. One thing that I've thought of is, as he gets older, maybe start letting limited amounts of screen time, but programs for kids in French, so that at least it's something that's, like him.
Educational. If it's going to be on a screen, might as well get some value out of it and some learning.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I don't know, for the time being, he's just like happy to go outside and, play with blocks, and just, do whatever. Like, I don't think he like misses it.
Yeah.
Although
You never have it. You
he
never
did
miss
like
it.
the
Yeah.
wrestling.
Yeah. Yeah. He wants to bring back WWE Raw, but
Yeah.
otherwise, yeah, all good. Yeah. I'm also impressed and inspired that how much you and Lauren and Theo are able to travel around. I guess just projecting my ideas in the future, I would imagine it's somewhat difficult to travel with a young child, but maybe you could let us know your experiences. I think you've gone over to France with him, gone out to some cross country skiing, and stayed over in a yurt. How's that been?
It's great. I think that, the key there is you have to soon after, obviously not like immediately, but when they're like 4 months old or something, you just like really start taking them places and never stop, really. Because then they just get comfortable with what would otherwise be possibly slightly uncomfortable for them. And they learn to kind of adapt to things in a way that if you have a hyper, we try to be like structured with naps, and things, because kids that don't sleep like turn into absolute terrors. Like that's just what happens. So like
Yeah.
there are, that you go off like, certain like absolute truths, and then from there kind of be as open as possible. And so like, we go for hikes, like sometimes he just naps in the hiking backpack, and you just kind of figure out ways to keep getting out there and doing things that you want to do with, well, with the kid. as far as traveling, he's honestly, and this could just be a personality thing, like all kids are different. He's really only acts up when he's bored. So he's way more likely to be a jerk at home than he is when we're out and about and he's, seeing new things and new people and that he really like kind of responds well to those environments. Whereas, yeah, if it's like, hey, I've been in my playroom for 2 hours, like let's do something else. And that,
Right.
that's when he, starts to kind of get a little testy and yeah. So I would say just get out there, just get out there and don't stop doing stuff with them.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
just
it's
get them used
fun,
to the
like
movement.
yeah, used to the movement, used to the adventures. Like if you're gonna take them somewhere that requires a whole bunch of gear, you try to like make the gear process as fun as possible, or you're gonna take them somewhere that I don't know, you have to like wait for something, think of things to do, um, or yeah, like little weird games to play while you're waiting for X or Y. So yeah, in times that they would otherwise, possibly act out, just kind of have a plan of like some other thing, and it's not always going to go to plan, but at least you have plans.
Right. And with obviously your adventures with your family, and work with the wine and their kind of time commitments, have you found that you've wanted to, needed to, been able to kind of build out time for yourself for a kind of exercise routine or getting out, maybe more socially or active? I know you love riding bikes and big Tour de France fan and cycling world fan. So how's that been, kind of juggling all the various different responsibilities and still making some time for some of the passions that you've had for a while?
Yeah, that has been tough. Like obviously when you have a kid, your free time is a whole lot less. So you just prioritize the things that you kind of want to do. Lauren's super cool about letting me say, Saturday mornings I ride with a cycling team, and Lauren's very cool about letting me piss off for like 4 hours, 5 hours at a time. And then, it's like Sunday is like her day or Sunday afternoon or whatever. And, like I'll watch the guy. So I still try to get out there. And if I can, get off work a little early, sometimes take the mountain bike out and, for a quick spin or, but that is hard. It's hard to, find the time that you used to like really take for granted. You're like scheduling it out. For me, having the Saturday ride is a lot easier because it's every week, it's scheduled. So that's like, my kind of time.
Yeah, and so you mentioned life kind of before a kid, and you glanced over this a little bit while you were talking about Kenan and kind of traveling to New Zealand and South Africa. And I do want to bring you and Kenan back on a show dedicated primarily to the voyage around the world. But maybe you could just kind of preview that a little bit for us. Tell us kind of what you did, maybe what inspired it, and then give us a little foreshadowing prelude into a future
Yeah.
episode.
So, Ken and I did a circumnavigation, between 2018 and 2020 on a 34-foot 1971 Tartan 34 sailboat. Stopped in, say, 18 different countries. But yeah, stopped in. So New Zealand essentially has a hurricane season also, the cyclone season in the southern hemisphere. So we were there for almost like 9 months. It's in South Africa as well, kind of waiting for good weather to cross the southern Atlantic. But yeah, we probably started kicking around the idea 2012, when I moved down to DC and started sailing with Kenan um, on his boat on the Chesapeake. And yeah, I think we really got serious. We did a circumnavigation of the Delmarva Peninsula, which is like that little part of Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia on the Atlantic Ocean and Chesapeake Bay. And at that time, this was Obama administration, and it was the first time that there was like a serious government shutdown, and it was like still a big deal. It hadn't happened in a while, and people were scared. And I just remember, Kenan was working at the State Department at the time. And so we were close enough to shore that we got cell service. So he's like reading all this stuff. He's like, I don't even know if I'm gonna have a job. I don't know. So then we're like, well, if we took a right, we could hit Bermuda. And we're like, all right. Like, do you think the boat would make it? So we kind of went through the like thought experiment of, we pretty quickly decided that maybe that wasn't the safest idea. But then, started being like, well, okay, so how would we do it? Like, how would we make it safe? Like, it's possible. Like, it's possible. And then
Hmm.
yeah, we kind of just like kind of kept like pulling that string, so to speak, until we got like real serious about it and started saving up money and then like eventually set a date to leave and we did. We just left. Quit our jobs and just went sailing for 2.5 years. So yeah, that was the big sailing trip. But it'll be fun.
Yeah.
It'll be fun to get on here with Ken and Ken about it too, because he's we had people tell us kind of like how long are you gonna be gone? Were they like 18 months, maybe 2.5 years? Because like really you can either the way the like weather patterns work, like you can kind of do 18 months about as fast as you can do it, and then it's like 2.5 years is another good way to do it, and or like 3.5 or but we had people say like, oh, you better watch out after a year. If you're on the boat for a year, you're never you're never gonna come back to land, really. Like this is gonna inform the rest of your life and like change it in such a drastic way that you're gonna have a real hard time living on land again. Um,
Right.
I was engaged, or at least got engaged on the trip, and kind of had like plans to rejoin terrestrial society, as it were. But Kenan still got to tell captaining a beautiful boat down the Virgin Islands, absolutely living the dream. But they were right. Like he hasn't quite made it back yet. I think he will. I think he will. But yeah.
And we'll
Time
tell.
will tell. Time will tell. He's still out there sailing.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, thank you for that intro. And yeah, we'll planning to have Kenan on either the next episode or one shortly thereafter. So we'll get his backstory, his lead in, and then would love to bring you both back together to recount some
Yeah.
tales from the
Oh yeah.
seas. Excellent. Well, yeah, thank you very much for taking the time to join us to come on the show. We'll give you an opportunity to put any plugs out there, anything you want to leave us with as final words.
No, not really. You're one of the few that have come out. But if anyone's listening, come out to New Mexico. It's a beautiful place. We'll set you up. Forgotten state.
Yeah, the land of enchantment. It is actually, it feels pretty
Yeah,
magical out there, I must
totally.
admit. Yeah, it was a great trip. Well, thanks again for coming on, Eric. Good seeing you. And yeah, we'll have you back
Yeah,
on soon.
pleasure, man. Thank you.
Take care. Bye, everyone.